So Core Logistics was indeed run 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe. Core Logistics, it has always been a physical event. We've run it, this year was the 12th year we've run it. So the first challenge that we had was, what do we do? How do we run it? Do we go hybrid? A lot of people were going hybrid. We were scheduled for October. We were having these conversations back in April, May this year. So it was for us, it was a big decision about whether to try and do hybrid, which in all honesty, from an operational point of view, felt to me like I was going to be working on two different events. It felt like I was budgeting for one, budgeting for another, on-site ops for one, virtual ops for another, marketing for one, marketing for another. So it felt extremely intense. Then the decision was sort of taken away from us. Corona took a turn, and it became obvious that we were not going to be able to be on site in Rotterdam in October. So we then decided that back in July, August time, that we were definitely just going to go virtual, and we were going to embrace the virtual side. So we were then, the second big decision that we were making was to do with price points. Our event is traditionally quite content heavy, and we are priced accordingly. And that suddenly felt like an unreasonable price point to sit at. But of course, we didn't really have a huge amount of comparison. So we set a price point, and in all honesty, it was a bit of a finger in the wind, whether we were going to still manage to attract the right people. But that felt like a very big decision and a big process that we went through, and actually luckily worked out well for us. I think the other challenge is, and I constantly said this, or we constantly said this to each other as a team, is we had to move away from comparing ourselves to the physical. So right up until the day of the event, we are a team of very experienced event organisers. Between us, I dread to think how many years experience we've got, but I've got 20 odd myself, and the rest of the team probably similar. And they've all been on-site events. So our default was to go back and to compare and to think, well, if we were on site, we would have done this and it would have worked like this. And what we were all determined to do was to stop that way of thinking, to rearrange the way that we approached the event. So to think of this as an opportunity to start a completely new way of working, which was quite scary, really, for us old school event organisers who are very entrenched in our ways. But it had to be seen as an opportunity. It had to be seen as a new type of event rather than a sort of BTEC version of what it should have been. I didn't ever want this event to feel to the audience like an interim. It had to feel like a new opportunity and a new event, and an event that we can grow on. It wasn't just a stopgap for, this is what we're going to do while Corona's going on, and then we'll go back to the old school. It had to have its own place in the calendar, and I think we achieved it. So again, traditionally, Core Logistics in its 12th year has been a 3-day, what we would call conference-led event. So it would be closed to external visitors. Everyone that was there was a attendee at the conference, and we would then have somewhere between 10 or 15 tabletop exhibition stands outside the conference area. And then we'd be bolstered with lots of networking. We'd have lots of drinks receptions and awards ceremony. But it was very much the kind of event where everybody moved together to each element. So everybody was either in conference or in exhibition or at drinks reception or on port tour or so on. We would generally have between 200 and 230 delegates, roughly. and our international reach was pretty big. We're an international shipping event, so we would generally be hosted at a port. So what was interesting about moving that to virtual was firstly looking at the booking pattern. And again, the old school conference-led booking pattern benchmark that we would still work towards was that your delegate numbers would double 6 weeks out from your event. For our event this year, our delegate numbers doubled in the last week before the event. So we're seeing a very, very different pattern to how people booked. However, the booking numbers went up and we ended on numbers of 370 plus, which was incredible. And they came from 42 different countries across time zones ranging from California in the Western US to Sydney in Eastern Australia. So we had a big range geographically and internationally. The thing that we learned from that geographical boundary, and also the very different levels of attendees we probably had people who would never have had permission from their managers to attend an event like ours, but because they didn't have to travel, they didn't have to stay in a hotel, they were allowed to attend. However, what we learned from that was that people do not clear their diaries for a virtual event at all. So the scale of the event was huge, but a lot of people are consuming it on demand. A lot of people are dipping in and dipping out and watching it back later on. I think we were looking at sort of a 50-50 in terms of how many people consumed the event as it was happening and how many people watched it back on demand. So the scale of the event grew and morphed very much, but the opportunity to upscale through the virtual platform was amazing for us. So I think our biggest success, it's always quite difficult for an ops person, isn't it, to not automatically just be critical. But our biggest success was the international audience, without a doubt. But also, from a technical point of view, we did not engage with a production company. So we had an event platform that we used, and we had an event app that we used. That was completely coordinated by our team. So we ran the event fully. We had one person providing tech support as and when we needed her. But in terms of running the event, it was run by us. Now, this was a bit of a gamble, I would suggest. But actually what it meant was that we kept that connection with our audience. So when speaker training sessions were happening, there were at least 2 members of the call team on every training session. So we were there to continue to talk to our speakers in the way that I would if I was on site, that I would be loading up their presentations, I'd be introducing them to other people, I would be extremely hands-on with them, and I wanted to continue that. So in order to do that, we didn't have a production company. We did it ourselves. It was a big learning curve, but it meant that we could retain that communication and that feeling that people enjoy about our events, which is that they are very looked after and that they're very known. They're not just talking to an AV technician who they've never met before, who doesn't know who they are. They are talking to me. I've been working with them for 12 years. I know them. They're talking to my colleagues who know them. And that cultivated the sort of the human contact, which we obviously missed, and it wasn't a physical human contact, but it still meant that they were seeing somebody on camera and they were asking questions of somebody that they knew. And that felt operationally like a really big success. And it meant that they engaged with us very fluidly and easily. I think the other thing that was a big success is the on-demand, which again is something that we've never done. We've never recorded our events and been able to put them out there as quickly as we could. The technology that we had enabled our sessions to be downloadable 20 minutes after they finished, which I think actually beats BBC iPlayer, I think. I wouldn't like to verify that, but I feel like we beat the BBC iPlayer in terms of allowing people to download the content really, really quickly. And again, operationally, that was challenging, but very, very rewarding, and people enjoyed being able to consume the data, being able to consume the content in that way. So I think overall the biggest success for us was, that personal touch, still feeling like the speakers knew who they were talking to, they knew who they were relating to, and they still felt like they were being looked after by the cool team, which is one of our big USPs. So the reaction from the community was, initially, they really miss live events. There's no question. Everybody wants to get back. I think virtual events are awesome, and I think they will be around forever now. I think that we've started something that will keep going, but I think they will end up running in tandem somehow, because I think people still want people. They still want to network. They still want to meet people. They want to look people in the eye. We had a lot of people who talked about the fact that they reconnected with people they know, but trying to get people to meet people that they didn't know. You don't know the people you don't know, and that's what you get at a live event. The person that you grab a cup of coffee with, or you happen to hold a door open to on the way into a meeting room, or you're introduced to by somebody else. Those are the live connections that we missed. And we're all learning about how to. I think we've become quite good at providing content online, but we now need to work much more on how we provide networking opportunities. So there is definitely a place for virtual events, and the physical will still be a big pull. But generally, the reaction from the community was great. We had a few what we call open lunch sessions run by my colleague Helen, who was awesome and just was there. We encouraged people to go and grab their lunch and come back to their computer and have a chat. And we had some really interesting connections going on those slightly smaller forums where people felt they could flip their camera on and kind of say hi. So they really enjoyed that. The other thing that I found quite interesting is that when people are able to make a comment online, or through an online help desk, or through email, they're that bit quicker to complain. So if there was something that someone wasn't 100% happy about, my feeling was, on site they might not have bothered, whereas online they'll immediately fire something off to you and say, oh well, what about this or what about that. However, the plus side of that is that we actually got a lot more live positive comments as well. So equally, we had a live help desk running, we had a chat function on our app, and we got a lot more feedback from people, positive and negative, but immediately. Whereas I suppose if you're in an actual environment of a conference, people are in a room, by the time they come out, they're less inclined to sort of come over to the reg desk and say, oh, by the way, X, Y, and Z. Whereas because they could just immediately put that feedback in, it felt like we were bizarrely connected more to a lot of people, which is unusual and was not expected. But overall, the reaction was great, and people enjoyed it. So I would say, and this is from an operational point of view, look after your team. The thing that's very different about running a virtual event is, and for the majority of teams, certainly for our team, is that we were all separate in our own houses, in our own environment. And I was very worried about the team feeling isolated. One of the things we love about being on site is that you get that spirit, you get that buzz, you get that support system going, and you all work, and you can support each other, and you can enjoy each other, and you can laugh together, and possibly cry together as well, but you can, it will all happen as a team on site together. And actually I was worried about people feeling isolated. So my point would be keep the team spirit going, allow the team that you've got, teach them what they need to know in order to feel confident. Running a virtual event is different to running a physical event, there's no question. Don't just expect that your ops team or your marketing team or your media team or whatever team you've got are just going to be able to do it. Invest in them, train them, give them the confidence to be able to know, to give them the skills that they're going to need in order for them to feel more confident. And then the confidence will come out through the virtual event. I think you probably need a bigger team on site. I wish we'd had a bigger team on site, as it were, virtually on site. But I think you have to make them feel confident that they know what their new role is. Be very aware of scheduling. I had a big Excel spreadsheet where I had everyone's time scheduled, including breaks. And in reality, I think a lot of people didn't take them. But when you feel like you're permanently working, but you can't visually say to somebody, oh, I'm just popping to the ladies for a minute, you can be in danger of feeling like you've got no break, you've got no time out. So I'd allowed pockets of the day when people would have a second in command, if you like, who would take over their role if they needed to step away. If you're sitting looking at a screen all day and you're quite tense and you've got the adrenaline running, you need to have downtime in a totally different way to how you do when you're on site physically. So I think look after your team. That would be my point. Engage with them, train them, be kind to them, and they will thrive. And I have to say, as a sort of diehard events op person who was dreading this event, it was brilliant, and I came away buzzing, and I enjoyed it, and it was fun. And I think we need to learn from that, but we won't unless we all feel confident and we feel properly trained. We're not going to get the enjoyment from it. And I think the final point is, I said to one of my delegates, how do we keep the spirit of the event alive? And he said, what you need to do is you need to, on your event platform with all your buttons where it says talk to an exhibitor and visit the virtual exhibition and ask a question and post on social media, he said you need a button that says send a hug, because ultimately that's what we all miss, isn't it, about physical events, is meeting people that we've known for years. So he said you need to send a hug. So that would be my point for next year.